Hi there YouTube, this is the Magnus, bringing you a competitive gameplay review of the Dwarfs for multiplayer battles, specifically on the ladder, and also tournament play. We're going to start off by taking a look at the Lords. Thorgrim Grudgebearer is definitely my favorite here. There's really two reasons for that. One is the High King, which gives plus 8 to melee attack, plus 4% to charge bonus, and makes your men immune to psychology. And with a 250 meter effective range, that's going to affect everybody that you have most of the time. And the Great Book of Grudges is going to give you plus 8 melee attack as well. So that's a total of plus 16 for everybody within 45 meters and plus 8 to everybody within 250. So I generally just bring those two. Sometimes stand your ground. The only thing is the leadership buff is really not necessary, especially when your guys are immune to any sort of psychology, and the dwarfs already have ridiculously high leadership and armor. But I do sometimes bring this because at 150 and you can use it every 90 seconds, it's not bad. Ungrim is definitely a great fighter. And the death blow is a nice thing to have, but the problem I have with death blow is it's so conditional. If you look, disabled if hit points greater than 20%. So this is only going to affect him when he's nearly dead. So generally I pass on that. I pass on these two. Stand your ground, again, I'm iffy on. And Axe of Dargo is great for 26 seconds. But for 244 with a 135 cooldown, I just can't justify bringing it. So generally, I bring him like this, and he's only 1400. The Lord, again, if you pass on the abilities, he has the ability to get the Fiery Ring of Thori. It gives you basically some magic attack, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But the problem is he doesn't have nearly the survivability of Ungrim or the just raw hitting power, but he is much better if you look at melee defense, 60, right? And Thorgrim, though, here is my favorite again because of his ability to greatly buff all the infantry in your army, which honestly you need because the infantry for the dwarfs are just so defensive. The Thane, again, I don't like the abilities. I like the healing potion, the potion of toughness. At 749, it's hard not to take two of these guys. It really is, because at that price, you know, you're getting a very, very tanky, capable unit that's going to stick around forever with those potions. The Master Engineer, I've got to be honest, I find his abilities so underwhelming, and they only matter for the beginning of the engagement in a lot of ways. I just don't ever bring this guy. The Runesmith, must have. Okay, Forge Fire, 4% for 143, no thank you. Rune of Oath and Steel, plus 15 armor. For 15 seconds, it affects people around you. That's good. Rune of Wrath and Ruin at 72. Hard to say no to. Again, it gives you a chance to put a little extra damage on enemies. Sorry about that. On enemies that you can't reach, or especially things like wraiths when you're playing against the vampires. The Rune of Wrath and Ruin is going to be useful too. The Rune of Negation is the stud out of the group. Now, it only lasts 12 seconds, which is unfortunate. But for those 12 seconds, you take 44% less damage. And that is just astronomical amount. Now, under items, the 20% missile resistance, unless you're playing somebody that you're absolutely sure is going to bring a lot of missiles, just not worth it. 145 it's just not good. I usually bring this, but sometimes I don't. I'd say it's 50-50. Because again, leadership isn't really something you're lacking as a dwarf, but it is constant, and I like constant abilities. So I probably bring it a little more than I don't. Another constant is the Rune of Stromny Redbeard, leadership and melee attack. And if you remember, if you have Thorgrim, you're already having potentially plus 16 melee attack to all of your fighters, and this is another 8. So now, bang, you're looking at plus 24 your guys are going to be able to hit a lot more often, because that's what melee attack does. So even though you have lower weapon strength, you're going to be hitting your enemies much more often than they're hitting you, and you're going to chip away at them pretty darn quick. So I really like the Runesmith. It's an absolute must-have for any dwarf army. If you go without it, you're just sinking yourself. Miners are exactly what you think they are, cheap garbage. If you have an extra 350 or you need somebody to eat some fire from the opponent, maybe, but generally not worth it. Miners with blasting charge, it looks cool, and it's, you know, it's a little gimmicky, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And they do have Vanguard deployment, but unless you're doing something really creative with them, not worth it. Dwarf Warriors at 475, you can see they have great armor, really solid leadership, really solid melee defense. The attack and weapon strength leave a little bit to be desired, but it's really not that bad. At 475, these guys are a good value, and anytime you need a decent size amount of infantry, it's always good to chuck a few of these bad boys in there. The great weapon upgrade is virtually never worth it. I don't know why, but it just doesn't work well. Same thing with the Longbeards. Stay away from the great weapon. Maybe if you're fighting chaos, you can justify bringing it, but even then, it just does not seem as cost effective. Your Dwarf Warriors and your Longbeards, don't think of them as damage dealers. These guys are meat shields, and then with all the plus melee attack, they're good at just chipping away, because they're going to hang out forever, and they're just going to chip, 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 chip. They're not a hammer or a hammerer. Hammer, I don't even know how you say that correctly. But the Longbeard, this guy is your mainstay go-to infantry. He's middle of the road in price, middle of the road in performance, but his high armor, his high leadership, his high melee defense, and then, you know, decent weapon strength, melee attack's a little low, but if you have that plus 24, he's going to be hitting 54. Because plus 24, 30, 20, yeah, 54. And decent weapon strength. Again, stay away from the great weapon ones. There's almost never a cause to bring them. Slayers, when they got brought down to 1,000, I thought they were going to be worth it. But truthfully, unless you can micro them well, and make sure they only face large, and make sure they're not taking missile fire, then they're worth it. If you can't micro them well, and you got to be honest with yourself about that, or if you're expecting missiles, things like that, don't bring the Slayers. They get shredded by missiles because they have no armor, they have no shield, and infantry, you'll get much better value out of virtually any other unit fighting infantry. So these guys are highly specialized. So if you're going to bring them, bring one, and make sure you're using him exactly how he's intended, otherwise he's going to sink you. The Hammerers, if you want a damage dealer and you're playing the Dwarfs, Hammer's the way to go. I like to bring one or two of these bad boys. They have crazy weapon strength, really good melee attack, and again, you add those buffs, they're at 68 melee attack. It's crazy. And they're armor piercing, and they have the damage dealer trait, so they will literally pound through anything. The only bad thing about them is I think they're a little too expensive. At 1,100, I'd really like them. At 1,200, I only kind of like them. Ironbreakers. Ironbreaker looks great on paper. He's got this really cool couple of charges, but unfortunately they usually miss. He's got ridiculous armor and leadership. He's got crazy melee defense and decent weapon strength and melee attack, but nothing to write home about. If you need something to hold forever, the Ironbreaker's for you. And he's very situational that way because he's not going to do a lot of damage. He's not. Never. It's not going to happen. And at 1,300, can you really afford to take something that's just defensive? And at 1,300, is he better than having 2 Longbeards? Right? Because you can have 150 Longbeards for the price of 75 Ironbreakers. Most of the time, I want the Longbeards. There are exceptions. Like if I already have a pretty sizable army, like I go pretty warrior heavy instead of Longbeard heavy, that's pretty cool. But I always like to make sure I have at least a couple Longbeards because the old Grumbler trait, which we didn't mention when we looked at them, my bad, he gives a leadership bonus when there's not a leader around, so he's definitely very useful in that regard. For missiles, Quarreler is great. One of the best missile units in the game. It's got great range, it does good damage, it's armored and shielded, which is ridiculous for a ranged unit, And he can even fight melee pretty decent. If you look, he's got 28 weapon strength and 16 melee attack. Now, that attack is terrible. 16 is bad. But remember, if he's going to have +8, +16, +24, he's going to hit a lot. So even if they get through your lines, the Quarreler keeps fighting, and that's what I like about him. Quarreler with great weapon. Remember, great weapons and dwarfs do not mix. Don't take the great weapon. Almost all the time, it's just not going to pay off. And I say that from tons of experience. I've literally spent dozens of hours testing unit against unit in different circumstances with some of my friends and some of the people I play with, and it just, the great weapons don't work for the dwarves. It's just not good. Thunderer, another great missile unit for the dwarf faction. A little less range, but it has armor piercing. So if you're fighting chaos, it's good to have it for that. But generally, most of the people that you're going to fight against are going to be lower armored, like the Beastmen or most of the vampire units. But if the vampires are bringing a lot of Graveguard, or you think the Beastmen's going to bring a lot of its Bestigors, stuff like that, then it does make sense to avoid the Quarreler and go with the Thunderer. The only other thing, though, is the Quarreler is a lot easier to use on the battlefield because you can pretty much set them anywhere and they will fire away. Now obviously you want to be targeting and focus firing, but sometimes you get distracted and the Quarreler is going to keep putting down damage. He'll find a target. Whereas your Thunderer a lot of times can't shoot over things, it doesn't have line of sight, and he's just going to be standing there, and that's bad. They have virtually or maybe absolutely the same stats in melee as the Quarrelers. It looks like they have 4 more melee attack, same weapon strength and whatnot. So they also can get in the mix when need be, which is a great thing. The Iron Drakes, forget about it. Iron Drake with Troll Hammer Torpedo. Maybe if you think you're going to face a giant, for sure. And it's, again, an extremely situational unit. Generally not competitive. Don't want to touch it. The Grudge Thrower. Very good piece of artillery at 700. Definitely does a great job against infantry and accomplishes one of the most important things for your dwarf army, and that is ensuring that the enemy has to come to you. Because if the enemy makes you come to them and you're playing as the dwarfs, unless you're really good or your opponent is terrible or some other great luck comes your way, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So you always want to have a little bit of artillery with the dwarfs. No more than 1 or 2 though. I've seen people try 4 and 5 and they think they're cute, or they spend a ton of money on it, and you'll just get railed. I have no doubt about it. So the Grudge Thrower, though, very good for anti-infantry. Your option for anti-large is the cannon, and it also does well against infantry because of its armor piercing and whatnot, and it's relatively high damage. But this guy's really for targeting large, and I like the cannon. I like to go for people's monsters. If they bring like giants, that's a huge problem for you. It's anti-infantry and it's big. Great target for the cannon. Cavalry, like if they bring Blood Knights, if they bring Demigriff Knights, if they bring, any high-end cavalry, these guys, a cannon, if it starts at the right range and he runs, relatively straight even towards your lines, more often than not, a cannon can break cavalry. So if you're breaking a 1,500 gold Demigriff with an 800 cannon, you're getting a great trade. So it's hard to argue against the cannon. Right now in the current meta, which I hear it's going to be fixed in the next patch, but we'll see, the gyrocopter is very good. The only problem is you don't want to bring gyrocopters against people who have flying. Except for chaos. You can bring them against chaos because their flying is very slow. The Manticore and the Chaos Dragon are not going to be able to catch you. But if you try it against the vampires and they bring flying, they will catch and wipe out your copters quicker than you can imagine. If you go up against paladins and the king or the lord from Bretonia, you're done. Empire, they're going to bring a flying cohort and they're going to eat your gyrocopters for lunch. But if you're playing against people who generally don't bring flying, or more preferable, don't have flying at all, it's not even an option for them, that's when you want to go with this. So the Beastmen, they can only bring the Manticore, so you're good. Of course, if they bring archers, you could be in trouble too. Missile units are an issue. So up against Chaos, you're good. Up against another Dwarf, you're generally good. So the gyrocopter, and then you have the gyrocopter with the brimstone gun. Of course, one's anti-infantry, one's anti-large and armor piercing. So if you're expecting a lot of armor or large, favor the brimstone. If you're expecting a lot of infantry, then the gyrocopter is the way to go. And then after that, the organ gun, its range really prohibits its value. I'm going to say pass altogether. The gyro bomber, it's just not worth it. Pass. Flame cannon looks cool. If you win with it in a ladder battle, everybody will be impressed, because at 1400, it's a terrible value. So now that we went through the units of the Dwarfs, let's just talk a little bit about how they play. They do play differently than virtually any faction in the game, in that you're going to be defensive and reactionary. The only exception to that is when you bring the gyrocopters, under the circumstances we talked about before, then all of a sudden you have some dynamic portion of your army that's going to be able to be aggressive and assertive on the battlefield. Otherwise, the Dwarfs are about choosing great terrain, a good location, and making sure you know all the other factions. So you know, when is it good to bring gyrocopters? When is it bad? Should I be bringing a cannon or two, or a grudge thrower or two, or one of each? These kind of things are really going to help set you apart as a Dwarf player. The other thing is make sure that you don't go missile crazy. Don't go artillery crazy. Your infantry is your bedrock, and that really needs to be where most of your money is spent. Don't forget to bring that Runesmith. Don't forget to bring those Thanes. And remember, Thorgrim's the best. Ungrim's pretty good. And the standard Dwarf Lord's not bad at all. So that's how you're going to play the Dwarfs. Those are the units that are more cost effective. This is all based on math that I've done. I've got spreadsheets out the wazoo. And it's also based on experience of having played over 300 ladder battles. So this is what I've seen from playing them, playing against them. I hope this helps you guys out. If it does, please like, please subscribe. I'll be doing the other factions soon. If you've been paying attention, I've been doing them in alphabetical order, but I skipped Chaos because I heard a rumor. Don't know if it's true. That's why I'm calling it a rumor. But I heard a rumor that Chaos is going to be getting some price reduction in the patch that's going to be coming out with the Grim in the Grave here on Thursday. And if that's true, I didn't want to do the Chaos guide and then 2 days later have to completely redo it, because the last thing I want to do is leave bad information out there for you guys. So again, if it helped, please like, please subscribe. Can't wait to see you guys again. Going to be uploading some more ladder battles soon, more faction focuses like this. If you have any requests or questions, hit me up in the comments. Until the next time, this is the Magnus. Thanks a lot.